Hey guys, my name is Ed Burnett. Very quick background about me. I started my career as a full stack web engineer. Summary of my work history is I worked for 2 years as a software trainer. I was at 4 years at an agency called Code Driven NYC, which is basically a website factory. And I spent the last 6 years at startups and the last 5 years as the VP engineering of Namely Inc. So, oh, there it is. So I have this, I put this presentation together. I call it Agile at all sizes, except when you don't need it. I like to get philosophical when I talk. I like to not really talk about tech, but process. And that's what this is. This is primarily process. So I just want to talk a little bit about this because I want to define Agile, or what Agile means to me. And this is continuous improvement. Some people call it lean. It's a really common term. The concept is really simple. The idea is that you start, I mean, you can start anywhere. Typically, you start at gathering data. So you observe the world. You build a vision of what the world should be. You make a decision of what to do, and then you execute, and then you start over again. And I'm actually of the opinion that you can apply this to life. Like, you can apply this to being a better person, improving your relationship with your family, anything at all. So as a first case study, I'm gonna go through cleaning the house. So cycle one, you walk inside and you get some data. You say the house is a huge mess. And I have a vision. I'm gonna have a clean kitchen. And I'm gonna make a decision. The first thing I do is clean the sink. And then I do that, I clean the sink. Cycle two, I realize that there's a smell in the house. And so I have a vision again, and my vision is iterated. I have a clean kitchen with no smell. So I'm going to decide that the next action is finding the source of the smell. And then I do that. So that's simple, you know. That's a concept, you know, you can apply it to anything, problem solving. So this case study, this is what I went through at Code in Theory when I built Vogue.com. So congratulations, you work at an agency and you get to build Vogue.com. That is some good portfolio fodder. So this is what I got. You know, as an engineer, basically 150 pages of wireframes and design fell out of the sky right on my desk. We went through waterfalls, burned down charts, the whole shebang, and basically had 6 months with no client feedback while I was coding away in a bunker. And so what happened? It was a success. We launched on time, the client got what they wanted, and everyone was happy. But wait, so what happened here? Because this is about Agile, right? That didn't seem agile. Aren't we told that Agile, we're supposed to use it? If you don't, you're gonna have a not successful product. But the reality is that this was Agile. I was just on the execute phase because these designs that fell out of the sky, they had gone through this process with our design team. They had been working with the client. They said like, okay, is this what you want? No, okay, how about this? No, all right, how about this? And, you know, took a lot of work, but it came up with designs that the client liked, so when they were built, everyone was happy. And this is super common and okay. And so takeaways from this case study. Agile is a discovery tool. It's a tool that you use when you are finding your way in the world, when you're deciding what to do, when the goal isn't clear. And sometimes, especially when you're an engineer, at the end of that phase, you already know what to build. And this is, again, super common. So case study 3, startup dreams at Namely. So this is the company I work for now. And this is how a company usually begins. It starts with a vision. And our founder, Matt Straz, he had a vision to build an HR platform. He thought that it would be valuable for HR managers and companies to have a tool that would facilitate their process. So what did he do? He built a company. I joined it. And we needed, okay, now we have to build an HR company. So the first thing we did is that we listened to HR managers about their pain points. We just sat and listened to their process, and they basically unloaded on us about how their job was terrible. And what we did is that we whipped up a product with minimum functionality and gave it out for free. Basically like, here, is this valuable? And you go through that cycle a few times and you end up with a somewhat useful product. And typically startups have these departments called sales and client success. Sales work with prospects, client success works with your clients. And what they do is that we listened to them. We worked really, really closely with them. They built a vision and gave us this vision. Like, oh, hey, we need a PTO prospect. Like, we have a prospect that's saying no unless people can, request time off and managers can approve it. And that's what they gave it to us. And so engineering, us, basically were like, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's put together something. And this happens a lot because without product, you basically have 3 departments working together. You have engineering, sales, and client success. And a lot of times the details, whether it's architecture decisions, minute design decisions, they fall directly on engineering. And you can freeze at that point. You can be like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what to do. No one's telling me what to do. I can't do this. And you had to kind of work through that. It's hard to work through that, but you make product decisions, you put it out there, you end up releasing a lot of code. We've released a lot of very lightly tested releases, as I call it. I'm sure that'll get some good traction, but and you keep growing. And so we got the engineering kind of organization at this time. I'll call it agency-style teams or ad hoc teams. So, like at an agency, you have a huge pile of engineers, or maybe 6 engineers or whatever, and you put them together for a small project, and you say, build this. You form a small team, they break up when the product is done, and then repeat as necessary. And we gave these ad hoc teams complete autonomy about what technology are they going to use, what is the product going to look like, what's the code base going to look like, and you trust that. And during this time, I was going for full stack developers. I really liked the first presentation here because I consider full stack to be from the front end all the way to how to deploy it. If you get engineers that just are front end, just back end, it gets really hard to build those type of teams. If you get full stack developers that are willing to learn, okay, I can learn Chef, I can also learn JavaScript and everything in between, then you can be really, really agile in a lot of ways. So, takeaways from this experience. Listen to sales and clients for vision. They're the ones that are telling you what to do. Just keep listening to them. You do not be afraid to make product decisions, but more than anything, just your North Star should be ship value. If that's your North Star, if that's what you're doing, building stuff that is valuable, and that's what you're trying to do, then it's the only way that you're going to win. So case study 4, name lane growth. Those lightly tested releases can catch up to you. So we had to do an engineering reorg because, in short, we were missing predictability, and that can mean a lot of things. Whether it's the app not working the way you'd expect it to work, you release a bug, you change functionality, you redesign because someone dreamt it up, or you don't ship on time. It's not predictable. Because, once you get a certain amount of clients, they expect predictability. Once you have a certain amount of debt, it gets hard. As the VCs here will tell you, this is a good problem to have, though. A debt is not your enemy. But the vision of what we had is that we needed to add a structure and process to what we were doing, because that's the only way you can kind of get out of this mess. So we decided on this concept of feature teams. Now this is a industry best practice. This is super common, this term called feature teams. I think a lot of companies approach it slightly differently, so I want to dive into how we approach it and what I consider to be best practices. So the feature team traits. Basically, it's a cross-functional vertical. Each feature team, first of all, is cross-functional. So that means that they can take on front end, they can take on back end, they have the ops chops, they have design, they have QA, they can do everything. And they have a vertical slice of functionality. So that means they're in charge of everything from the front end, they're not reliant on other teams, is what I'm getting at. And that's really, really important. It's the same concept of like full stack developers, because a team should not rely on other teams in order to get their job done. They should be autonomous instead of individual autonomy, like, oh, what is this person gonna decide? It's a team-based autonomy. So, it's a team decision, because everyone in the team is ultimately sharing responsibility. If you release a bug, it's on the team. If there's an operational task that needs to be done, it's on the team to figure it out or build automation to kind of fix it, Feature team anatomy. So there are three kind of pillars to the teams that we rolled out. One is the development team, which again consists of designers, it consists of QA, it consists of ops people, back end, front end. But there's an individual in there that is the tech lead. And this tech lead is kind of the point person for discussing with other teams, other feature teams, or going to talk to clients, or making architectural decisions, or just going to more meetings, really. That's really kind of how I describe it. It's like, okay, you're a tech lead, that means you need to go to more meetings. That's basically it. There's a project manager who, ultimately you're gonna get deadlines, ultimately you're gonna rely on other teams' coordination, you can't avoid it. The project manager kind of fills that role, as well as an Agile coach role, because it's important to, I'll get into it a little bit more, but to keep this concept of continuous improvement and to foster it within the team. And the last role, which I think is the most interesting, is this product owner role. So product previously was this combination of engineering, sales, and client success, right? Now we have an individual in charge of that. We have an individual that is responsible for talking to the stakeholders, talking to the clients, and figuring out what's the problem set, what's the data, and then coming up with a vision. They bring the vision back to the team at large, and then they make a group decision of what to do. And so the product owner, in short, owns the roadmap, they own the backlog, they own the tasks and the stories. They're the point person for all that. And these are roles, they're not job titles. I'm the product owner on at least one team right now. I've gotten client success people to be, hey, you're the product owner. Tech lead role can bounce around people. These are roles, they're not titles, it's not department, So in practice, let's talk about this a little bit. The product owner will talk to stakeholders, they'll gather data, bring the vision back to the team works together to decide the action, the development team executes, and then you repeat. And this is where the term Agile kind of comes into play. It's this concept of continuous improvement applied to software development. And so the idea is that you iterate faster and faster kind of through this. You gather data, decide, build. Gather data, decide, build. Was this good? Was this bad? And that way, if you're at a good cadence, that means you can respond to new data, which happens a lot. So takeaways. Modern best practices exist for a reason. Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, these are agile processes that facilitate continuous improvement. That's their purpose. the whole team should be involved in this Agile process. If it's not just a like one person thing. It's not like, oh, it's up to the project manager to keep this going. And it's also really common, this Agile in name only concept. There's a lot of times where development teams, they're in that, the very first case study or the second case study, where stories will drop out of the sky. You'll have that 150-page document, and then you say, okay, build this, but do it in 2-week sprints, and also do retros at the end of that sprint, because that's Agile best practices, right? And that's a very important thing to identify, is that there's this concept of Agile in name only that I think I've seen a lot of people, that's their experience with Agile. It's like, Agile is just like sprints and stand-ups. And people I think it gets a bad rap. I think people get a sour taste of what Agile is all about. And being able to identify that is really, really important. So conclusion, the end. Not everything has to be Agile. It is not the silver bullet that I think a lot of people make it out to be. There's learn to identify Agile in name only. There's a reason why there are 10,000 freaking books about Scrum, because it works. It's a really good process, but if you do it half-heartedly, you're doing it Agile in name only, and you're just gonna give it a bad name. Embrace it. And the whole idea of Agile is continuous improvement. So that means if you're in this concept, if you embrace this concept of improve everything, whether it's your code, the process, or your workspace or your life, this is like a life lesson here. If you embrace this concept and improve everything, people see that. People really get that, and people will follow you if you do that. So that's it, just some recommended reading, because this is some of the most life-changing books I've ever read. How to Win Friends and Influence People, I recommend it to everyone. Lean Enterprise, if you're familiar with Lean Startup, this is better. Essential Scrum, which is basically a textbook about what Scrum is. Like, it gets into all the nitty-gritty roles. You can read that if you want. And Management 3.0, this is a little bit more for managers that manage Agile teams. I don't know how many of that applies to you. Definitely was relevant to me. That's it. Cool. Any questions?
Yeah, I assume that the idea of feature teams is so the team can concentrate on the same topic, on the same functionality, and this way gather that knowledge easier, right? That they kind of keep in the same space, right?
Very much.
But at the same time, you mentioned that you play multiple roles. How do you have both together, right? How do you minimize the amount of teams you're on, but at the same time, interact with multiple roles?
That's generally people are on one team. Like, most people are on one team. I'm a little bit special at Namely, so I get to be on like more than one team. You raise an interesting point, because there is that challenge of, especially when you embrace autonomy. Like, if there is one team that's in charge of this, and exactly what you said, there's a deep root of knowledge. So if someone quits, or if someone leaves the company or whatever, that knowledge isn't lost. But there is a challenge with that, because it's up to the team to make these decisions. So it's really hard sometimes for teams to know what other teams are doing. That is a challenge, especially when someone is on one team. I kind of knew what you were getting at, but it takes like events, like tech talks, like people will swap team members, stuff like that. There's different like tricks, I guess. Sorry.
How do you assign roles?
Well, generally, generally the roles are, a tech lead is going to be a senior engineer, A product owner is going to be someone that is willing and able to put in the time to like figure out the vision and sit with stakeholders. It's usually not engineers. It's usually like either business people or product people. Project managing is, if you really want to embrace the agile coach of it, you have to have experienced people that know what we're trying to do. I mean, those are the three roles, and generally it's kind of obvious who fits into what. That answer your question?
But you have like a different team that you're saying basically a different team as a manager, and the manager basically assigns a role to the team.
No, it's generally like there's a manager of a department called project management. There's a manager of a department called product. It's not like there's a manager and you have the entire team. It's very much like kind of spread apart. Like it gets into it. You had a good question.
You're preaching, the Agile utopia, and it's really beautiful in every way, right? And we kind of want to learn from your experience, right? Building on Sergey's point, right? You mentioned that these different code bases in different languages in the feature teams, right? And what does happen with the turnaround? Like if you have a team that's, it just seems so risky to have so many teams with these kind of, and how much autonomy do they have in the hiring of their own team? How much kind of input do they have in what, especially once you have your own code base and that's your own language essentially, right? That's separate from your main project. The maintainability of that seems kind of nightmarish. So tell me how you guys handle it.
Well, it's a balance. Like a big part of it is holding people accountable. Like within the Scrum, textbook, there's this concept of demos, and the idea of demos is that you're holding people accountable on a regular cadence. So it's not like you can like code in a basement for a long time. It's like every sprint you're like still working on it. Like it's a requirement that you share what you're doing with a larger audience. And yeah, it is, the scene that I set up is a little utopian in that sense. There is not pure autonomy, there's a driving force of like, payroll is a big initiative, for us this year, and it's important that everyone focus on payroll because here's some.
So payroll is like a feature, not as a payroll.
It's you could call it a larger vision, like where, again, like someone that has knowledge of the ecosystem of our competitors, the knowledge of our our platform as a whole. In order to compete with these competitors, we need to prioritize like certain aspects of payroll, for an example. So it's not like total autonomy. There's still like a vision, larger goals to kind of get into that. That answer your question?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just very interesting to see, and I'm absolutely with the follow-up with you. You're doing some awesome stuff.
Cool. Yeah, appreciate it. I'm back.
How do you build consensus? Because when you try to build these autonomous team and like everyone's a friend and this is good for you, like if you say that and then you just trust me, it's like good for you. Like how do you build this consensus? Because
Are you talking about what to build or process change?
well, process change,
Yeah.
like leading like in this like good way of working together, we know, but we want to have it be a team that's making.
I'll say this about process change. It's okay to wait because it's actually a lot easier to make process change if people feel pain. And it sounds weird, but no, I'm serious. It's like it's a lot harder to convince someone like, hey, you should change process because otherwise bad things are going to happen. It's a lot easier to be like, so all these bad things that are happening to you right now, there's a better way. It's okay to punt on process change, is what I'm saying. Like, and the word consensus, I love talking about that word because there's no way you're ever going to get it. It's okay for someone to conclude like, no, I know you two disagree. We're going to go with this decision. We're going to try it out. And if everyone's professional, if everyone respects each other's decision-making ability, then, it works out generally. Yes?
Just following on from that point, I think one of the things that teams can lapse into is kind of a sense of comfort. They're not disrupted very often. How do you keep people disrupted and make sure that what they don't see is you can get used to any kind of pain if you just do it for long enough. How do you make people realize that there is?
That's a fantastic question. How do you get people disrupted? Because, between case study 2 and 3, there's a lot of process change. And just to be totally open, there were people that we lost because they were hired under this, hey, I'm in a little startup and type of a thing. You have to, disruption has to come from a larger force. And for us, that larger force was the business at large. Hey, how the website was down for a day? That can't happen. That is unacceptable. You almost need the boss to step in at that point. You need a strong disciplinarian, whatever that word is. But there's no way around it because you're absolutely right. People can get into the groove of la-da-da, I'm gonna release now, and then go home. And unless you set the expectation that what you did is unacceptable and follow up, then you kind of have to let them feel that pain. I'll come back to that. I don't know. It's an ongoing challenge. I'll say that. To answer your question, or?
No, I think it's a difficult problem for all of us.
Yeah, I wish I had a better, more silver bullet answer for that, but
I want to ask one last question.
Yeah.
I think one part of this cycle that isn't talked about enough is actually the, I guess you call it the learn cycle.
Yeah.
And specifically, there are a lot of times where you're getting what you might call false positives. Mm-hmm. So sales is coming to you and saying, oh, I've got 10 clients that'll sign tomorrow if we build feature X. Mm-hmm. You could be an individual founder, and you could be talking to a lot of target customers, and they can say, oh yeah, I'd buy that. Mm-hmm. But what they're saying to you is different from what will actually happen if you build it. How do you guard against false
How do you hire a good sales team?
How much time do you have?
I think we got lucky. I think that we had a pretty good sales team. We had a pretty good founder that understood and really embraced what our competitors were doing. I think we had good good investors that also understood that space. You're absolutely right. We did a lot of crappy builds. I think the only way to really avoid that or mitigate that is to embrace that concept of minimally tested builds, because everyone's going to have assumptions. Everyone's going to be like, oh, this button is going to solve it. Everyone's going to use it. So you spend a day, you write 0 tests, you put it out there and see who uses it. And the concept of fail fast, fail often, that's the only way to kind of figure it out.
All right, Ed, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.